Poland and the Baltic countries are to blame for the fact that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin started a full-scale war against Ukraine. Such a wild statement was allegedly made the day before by former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. It is telling that Merkel made such a statement in an interview with a Hungarian publication. Poland and Estonia have already responded harshly to Merkel, stating that she herself is, quote, one of the German politicians who has done the most harm to Europe in recent centuries. Well, and the Poles honestly replied that they never welcomed Germany's decision to get closer to Russia. But now that emotions have calmed down a bit, I want to talk to you in this episode. Angela Merkel partially blamed Poland and the Baltic countries for Russia's war against Ukraine. What's behind the headlines, and what did the former German Chancellor actually say in Hungary, and what didn't she say? Because there's something to discuss here. Given that most viewers on this YouTube channel are critical thinkers. So friends, my name is Pechiy. Today it's still October 7th on the calendar. Now that emotions have calmed down a bit, let's figure out what Angela Merkel actually said, why the Kremlin is reacting so positively to it, and why many of her words have been distorted. I'll say right away, I have no intention of defending Angela Merkel. But before we begin, I want to remind you that this YouTube channel releases several news and analytical segments every day. So please subscribe to this YouTube channel, give it a like, and leave any detailed comment under this episode. This really helps a lot in promoting the video on YouTube. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation. By the links and details in the description of this video, it says support the YouTube channel Pechiy. Use any format you prefer, I appreciate any support you give. Let's go through everything step by step. First, just record the facts without analysis. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel stated that Poland and the Baltic countries share joint responsibility for repelling Putin in Ukraine. In an interview with Hungarian publication Partisan, she said these countries' positions worsened European Union-Russia relations, ultimately provoking the war in Ukraine. Merkel said that in 2021 she tried to create a new format for direct negotiations between the European Union and Vladimir Putin, since, as she admitted, Putin no longer took the Minsk agreements seriously. At the same time, according to the former Chancellor of Germany, it was Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia that opposed this initiative, as she says, because of the fear that we would not have a unified policy towards Russia. Next, I will quote Angela Merkel, as cited by many media outlets. In any case, that didn't happen. Then I left my position, and Putin's aggression began. The start of the war in Ukraine was also influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic we could no longer meet because Putin was afraid of the coronavirus pandemic. If you can't meet and discuss disagreements in person, you won't be able to find new compromises. I should note right away that Angela Merkel, for some reason, did not mention that during the period of the Minsk agreements from 2015 to 2021, Russia continued the war in Donbass, and preparations for the full-scale invasion began back in the spring of 2021, long before she left politics. But for now, just the facts. Poland and Estonia later responded to comments made by former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Estonian Parliament, Marko Mihkelson, stated that Merkel's words cast a shadow over her time as Chancellor. Former Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, also spoke out sharply on this matter. Here is his quote. Angela Merkel, with her outrageous interview, proved that she is one of the German politicians who have done the most harm to Europe in the past century. The current Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Marek Sikorski, also responded to the statement by former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, in which she allegedly accuses Warsaw, Lithuania, and Latvia of being involved in the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. According to the head of Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, this is just as true as the former German Chancellor's claim that no one from Central Europe protested against Nord Stream. And indeed, Merkel states that, supposedly, Germany shouldn't be the only one blamed for everything right now. Because when they wanted to build Nord Stream with the Russians, no one said a word against it. Sikorski replies, well, that's absolutely true. Look at how the German government reacted to what I said in 2007 about how we don't like agreements being made over our heads. So apparently, the Chancellor forgot how her own government reacted to our protests. And here I will add that in the same interview, the former Chancellor of Germany expressed the opinion that the lack of a common European policy towards Russia could have led to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Like, while some were trading with Russia, others were against it, and so on. She suggested things might have been better if everyone had traded. Putin's side also responded to the scandalous interview with Angela Merkel. So, Russians, through Peskov, claimed that the insane policies of the Baltic countries have made the European Union and Brussels hostages of Warsaw and the Baltic states. The Kremlin welcomed Merkel's statement, saying it was great. They insist they didn't start the war. It was provoked. And now we move on to the analysis. First, where did the information come from that Angela Merkel blamed Poland and the Baltic countries for Russia's war against Ukraine? An article with exactly that title was published on October 6 on the website of the popular German publication Bild. Where and why did Merkel make such a statement? And this is where things get really interesting. Angela Merkel gave the interview to the Hungarian pro-government portal Partisan, which perfectly illustrates Russian orthodoxy. But why did Merkel give the interview at all? Why had she suddenly been silent? She was silent, then appeared for an interview. Simple. Merkel gave the interview during her recent trip to Budapest as part of the promotional tour for her memoir. Is a scandal around the author good publicity for the book? Yes, it's excellent publicity. Notice the recent buzz about Merkel. And at this moment, she's selling her new book. It's a brilliant public relations move. But did Merkel really reveal anything new about Russia's war against Ukraine that she had kept silent about until now? First of all, if you listen to the interview, you won't hear any phrases about Poland and the Baltic countries being partly to blame. As Bild writes, all the quotes, including the one I mentioned above, are interpretations by the Bild publication. By the way, if you go to the original article, it actually says at the bottom that it's about an indirect accusation. What exactly did Merkel say? Basically, Merkel claims that the Minsk agreements were already obsolete by 2021. No one took them seriously, especially Vladimir. That's why Merkel sought a new negotiation format. And then Merkel suggested holding another European Union-Russia summit together with Macron. Let me remind you, such meetings haven't been held since 2014, that is, after the annexation of Crimea. But this idea of a new summit was not supported at the European Union summit. Poland and the Baltic countries opposed this. After Merkel left office, Putin invaded Ukraine, to be fair. It should be added that Merkel herself, during the interview, accuses Moscow several times of starting the war. Overall, Merkel's message sounds roughly like this. A new format of negotiations with Putin in 2021 could have been a chance to prevent the war. But how realistic it was, we will never know. That's all. And here I will remind you that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, criticized Merkel's proposal at that time, calling it unfair. He said, "How can we negotiate with a dictator who is massing troops at our border?" All this occurred amid fears of a major Russian invasion of Ukraine that began in spring 2021. At that time, Russia sent troops to Ukraine's borders but withdrew only a few. At that time, Merkel herself was a leader whose political influence in Europe and the world was weakening. Just a few months remained before the Bundestag elections, which she was no longer joining. And here I can already anticipate comments saying that Pechiy was definitely paid. He's defending Angela Merkel. He didn't go along with the mainstream, but instead tried to figure something out on his own. Unfortunately, I often read such comments from people who either don't watch the video at all or only watch the first part. And that's why, for the most persistent and critically thinking viewers, we're moving on to the second part. It's important to note that since then, Angela Merkel's views haven't changed at all. She has remained Putin-Versteher. And next, we're talking about what Merkel didn't say. She believes, and by the way, she writes about this in her book, that she did everything right. Angela Merkel once again repeated her previously stated thesis that although Russia violated the Minsk agreements, it gave Ukraine time. She claims that this was the intention. But really, what kind of time did it actually give Ukraine? Merkel doesn't say, just as she doesn't mention the blankets and helmets Germany provided to the Ukrainian armed forces in the first days of the war. Merkel still believes in the power of diplomacy. She still insists that it's necessary to talk to the Russians, not just use force to deter them. But Merkel still doesn't mention that recent efforts by United States President Donald Trump and renewed contact haven't stopped Russia's war on Ukraine. Trump actually does talk to the Russians, but it didn't help. Angela Merkel also doesn't mention that before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there were a lot of contacts before the full-scale invasion, but the war continued and turned into a full-scale one. Many Western leaders, including Friedrich O., who succeeded her as Chancellor. Olaf Scholz met with Vladimir Putin. There was a summit between Putin and United States President Joe Biden in June 2021 in Geneva, and negotiations there as well, just weeks before the Russian invasion of Ukraine at the Russia-NATO and Russia-United States level. So, look at how many negotiations there were in 2021. Separate talks between Putin and Biden, separate Russian summits, a separate NATO summit, and a separate Russia-United States summit. Did any of this stop Putin? No. So the talks didn't help. And Merkel also insists that if Putin had come to the G20 summit in Rome at the end of October 2021, the war might not have happened. She says COVID scared Putin back then. He skipped the G20, something happened, and he started the war. But she keeps quiet about the fact that around the same time, Western intelligence agencies had already started publicly noting Russia's preparations for a large-scale invasion of Ukraine. Overall, Merkel didn't say anything new in this interview. Her position on Ukraine is in line with what, for example, Olaf Scholz has repeatedly said: Russia must not win the war and Ukraine must remain a sovereign free state. But as you can hear, there's not a word about Ukraine's victory in either case. So draw your own conclusions and write your opinion in the comments under this episode. I ask you to subscribe, give a like, and click the bell so you get notifications about new episodes. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.